I've got to go to this vaccine rollout, the ongoing brouhaha. Almost a third of Australians are now saying they're unlikely to get vaccinated, according to a new poll. Resolve strategic survey out in the 9 newspapers today says 29% of Australians are either not very likely or not at all likely to get the jab. Half of respondents say they're nervous about side effects. 38% say they don't know enough information about all of this. Ross, I don't understand why we're not saying to people that are vulnerable over the age of 50, whatever type of jab you want. If vaccine hesitancy on AZ's the problem, if you want Pfizer, have Pfizer, just get jabbed. Why aren't we giving people choice? And I've got to say, the messaging here is bungled because that hesitancy is growing. It's not abating.
Oh, no, it's exactly right. And I'm exactly with you. It should be a situation where a person should be able to say, I wish to have that jab and not this one. In this particular case, the government locked itself into AstraZeneca way too early. And obviously, for whatever reason, some parts of the community are concerned about getting that jab. Now, the fact of the matter is that the government at one stage, of course, said, well, the Pfizer jab is going to be saved only for the vulnerable and the very elderly. Then it was suddenly changed. No, we're going to give it to people under the age of 50. And so it moved around. And because of that, it was clear that then the community became confused about which was technically best for them. And so confidence, regardless of the facts, the veracity of the arguments, it just became a bit confusing. It's getting almost to the stage, I wonder, Peter, that maybe the government should use some of these very cheap taxpayer dollars and borrowed funds to actually have people paid to have the jab. I wonder whether that might change the community's attitude towards getting their vaccination.
I don't think it will. I honestly don't think it will. I think when the community mind, this is my political read, when it's set and it's set in like this, it's very, very difficult to change. I would just put Pfizer on the table for our most vulnerable, and I tell you what, that will move the rates like nothing else in a matter of hours. Treasury Secretary, so this is a chief economic bureaucrat for those at home, Stephen Kennedy. Well, he's been out and he's sounded the alarm over the Morrison government's record spending budget, arguing, of course, that eventually the spending largesse will have to be reined in. His post-budget address yesterday, he said the decade of deficits projected in the budget papers was in large part due to structural increases in spending in aged care and the NDIS. Ross, have we got you there? What did you make of his warning? Peter Costello's had the same warning. Is Josh Frydenberg listening? Eventually, money's cheap, sure, but money's not free. We've got to pay this back.
I think they've got to. They've also got to listen to Standard & Poor's, which came out with a similar view just straight after the budget. And of course, Standard & Poor's has Australia's AAA credit rating, the much valued AAA credit rating, on a negative watch right now. And there are suggestions that it will be reviewed by the end of this year. Whether Australia retains that AAA credit rating really, I think, is very much up in the air, unless the government has a strategy to try and get some sort of discipline back into the budget, even if it is down the track. Now, this is pretty important for Australians because you've got to recognise that if all of a sudden this flow of money stops very suddenly, there is a very sharp cliff for both housing markets and also potentially the stock market, reminiscent of what happened back in 1991. It's certainly not what the community wants, and it's certainly not also what Josh Frydenberg, I suspect, is wanting either.
Not at all. Tomorrow night, or tomorrow, the Victorian state budget comes down. We'll talk about it, obviously, tomorrow night. Sam Taraskio, one of the Melbourne property bigwigs, he's threatening to pull all new construction following the announcement of these property tax hikes in Victoria. They've been slammed by Josh Frydenberg. He says it's putting Victoria's economic recovery at risk. 1 in 4 jobs in Victoria are in the property sector. Even the Grattan Institute, for goodness sake, is paying a tax hike. What's your assessment, Ross?
Well, again, any tax increase at the moment is not wanted. And consider also that in New South Wales, by comparison, they're giving people the choice as to how they will pay stamp duty in the future. Now, if that gets through, and it's clear right now that New South Wales government is quite adamant that they want to get that through, people will have a choice as to whether they have to pay that stamp duty up front or indeed pay it over a period of time. So as I say, that's real reform as compared with just trying to slug people with extra taxes, which is a little bit of class warfare.
Yeah, I tell you what, it is absolutely that. And to make, make the books balance as much as they can after a lot of profligate spending in Victoria. Terry McCrann, Ross Greenwood, thank you both for your time.